Mr. Flashy's younger brother, Eric O'Driscoll, has been jailed after he fired a semi-automatic assault rifle from the back door of a house in Finglas in an attempt to intimidate rivals. The incident, which took place on New Year's Day 2022, was filmed on a mobile phone. This footage, later recovered by Gardaí, became damning evidence that tied O'Driscoll to the crime and ultimately led to his conviction. In April 2025, O'Driscoll was handed a 6-year sentence with the final 12 months suspended. Upon release, he must obey strict conditions. The court ordered him to keep the peace and avoid contact with 6 named individuals for 1 year, with a potential extra year in prison if he breaches these terms. Eric O'Driscoll was not an isolated offender. He grew up in the shadow of a well-known Dublin criminal enterprise. His older brother, Glenn Ward, is better known by the underworld moniker Mr. Flashy. Ward earned this nickname due to his flamboyant lifestyle and designer clothes, habits that also gave his crew the name Gucci Gang. Based in Finglas, the Gucci Gang rose to prominence in the late 2000s and 10s as a new generation of drug dealers filled the vacuum left by weakened older cartels. Irish police believe the gang took over drug territories in North Dublin, including Finglas, Ballymun and Coolock, with the support of the Kinahan Cartel. Mr. Flashy, who was only in his early 20s when he became a gang leader around 2017, had close links to the Kinahan organized crime group and used the same drug suppliers that the Kinahans had used. Because of their rapid rise and wealth, Mr. Flashy's crew drew intense law enforcement attention. In August 2019, Gardaí launched Operation Tattoo, a series of raids using armed support units and a helicopter, specifically targeting the Gucci Gang. Although those raids yielded only small amounts of drugs and minor arrests, they signaled official recognition that this outfit had the potential to become the city's next big drug gang. The Gucci Gang's activities, which allegedly ranged from drug trafficking to violent enforcement, put Finglas on edge and sparked fears of gang conflict as early as 2019. Even then, signs of an emerging feud were evident. That year, several homes of relatives of gang members were shot at in both Finglas and nearby suburbs as part of a brewing dispute between Mr. Flashy's gang and another group. By 2021, this conflict had escalated into an all-out Gangland feud, with tit-for-tat attacks becoming dangerously common. Within this environment, Eric O'Driscoll came of age, and by his early 20s, he had become one of his brother's trusted lieutenants in the gang, despite his youth. Growing up with an older sibling who was a local crime boss meant Eric was exposed to gangland influence from a young age. Mr. Flashy, by his late 20s, had achieved notoriety as a major drug dealer in Finglas, and he was identified in court as the leader of the Gucci Gang. Eric O'Driscoll, roughly 9 years younger, followed in his brother's footsteps. Despite having no prior serious criminal convictions before this case, Eric was well known to Gardaí as part of Mr. Flashy's crew. He was frequently seen in the company of known gang members and took part in gang activities. During a later bail hearing, police testified that Eric and Glenn were observed frequenting a suspected gang safe house in late 2021, indicating his hands-on role in gang operations. A key incident that would later come back to haunt Eric and his big brother Mr. Flashy occurred on January 1st, 2022. On that day, Eric and Glenn were present at a house, a local address associated with the gang. The two brothers took turns recording themselves firing a high-powered rifle out the back door of the house. When this video eventually came to the attention of authorities, a judge would conclude that it was made to display a show of strength and to intimidate others. The specifics of the New Year's Day gunfire incident remained somewhat murky until the video surfaced later. It is not publicly reported whether any neighbors called the police upon hearing gunshots, or if Gardaí were aware a shooting had occurred that day. It's possible the sound was mistaken for fireworks, given the date, or that fear kept any witnesses silent. What is clear is that no immediate arrests were made on January 1st. In fact, it took months before Gardaí obtained the incriminating video evidence. Just weeks after New Year's Day, Gardaí made a significant arms seizure that would later be directly linked to O'Driscoll's case. On February 10th, 2022, as part of a wider crackdown on gang feuding in North Dublin, officers carried out multiple searches in the Finglas area and uncovered a cache of firearms and ammunition. One of the houses searched in February belonged to innocent locals with no criminal ties. The guns weren't stored in the gang's main safe house, but had instead been hidden in a shed at a neighboring property, which Gardaí believe was used to stash the weapons without the occupant's knowledge. Investigators noted that there was easy access between the gang's safe house and this neighboring garden, allowing members to move the guns in and out discreetly while keeping them at arm's length from their main base. Despite recovering these dangerous weapons, at that point, investigators lacked direct evidence tying them to specific individuals. No forensic evidence was immediately linking Eric or Glenn to the guns. So while the seizure undoubtedly put a dent in the gang's firepower, it did not immediately result in arrests of the gang leaders. The case remained open and under active investigation. Gardaí likely suspected that Mr. Flashy's crew was responsible, but to secure convictions, they needed eyewitnesses, or better yet, hard evidence of the gang members handling these weapons. That hard evidence was on the horizon. In the weeks and months following the weapons seizure, tensions between rival gangs in Finglas began to escalate dramatically. By early spring 2022, the area was in the grip of a bitter feud between Mr. Flashy's Gucci gang and a breakaway group led by former associates. One key figure on the rival side was James Whelan, a 29-year-old drug dealer who had once been part of Flashy's crew. Whelan split from the Gucci gang and formed his own crew of young dealers. This split led to bad blood. Whelan's defection was seen as a direct challenge to Mr. Flashy's dominance, and both sides engaged in escalating threats and violence. In the months leading up to April 2022, there were numerous incidents, social media taunts, drive-by shootings at relatives' houses, petrol bomb attacks, as each faction tried to intimidate the other. The feud reached a deadly crescendo on the 3rd of April 2022, when James Whelan was shot dead outside his home in Finglas.
The 29-year-old was found yesterday morning on a footpath in Deanstown Avenue with a single gunshot wound, and he was pronounced dead at the scene. Gardaí are now investigating the murder, which is believed to be connected to an ongoing feud between two gangs in the area. That rivalry emerged in Finglas in recent years, but has been simmering in recent months and has also played out on social media. Gardaí at Finglas Garda Station met yesterday evening to determine their next moves in this murder investigation as they work to trace the last steps of James Whelan. The scene was closed off for a technical examination and a post-mortem was carried out, details of which aren't being made public for operational reasons.
Whelan's killing had immediate repercussions. His associates publicly blamed a close ally of Mr. Flashy for the shooting and vowed revenge on social media. In response, members of Flashy's gang shockingly posted a gloating message directed at the dead man, asking, "What did them bullets taste like, James?" While no one was immediately charged for Whelan's killing, police and media sources quickly identified a prime suspect, a young, close associate of Mr. Flashy in his early 20s. Many in the community and media speculated that this suspect was Eric O'Driscoll, given his age and position as Flashy's right-hand man, although authorities never publicly named him at the time, and he was never charged. The aftermath of Whelan's death saw further violence. In May 2022, Whelan's family home was firebombed at 2 a.m., forcing his mother and brother to flee for their lives. The gang feud in Finglas continued to spiral in the months following Whelan's murder. Then, on June 20th, 2022, events took another violent turn, one that inadvertently handed police the evidence they needed. On that day, Eric and Glenn were traveling in a taxi through Dublin when they were suddenly ambushed by gunmen. It's widely believed that the gunmen who shot at the taxi were associates of the slain James Whelan, seeking vengeance. However, this is unconfirmed. Bullets struck the taxi, but Eric and Glenn managed to escape on foot, fleeing for their lives. In the chaos, Eric dropped a mobile phone as he fled. This small mistake proved to be a pivotal moment. When Gardaí responded to the shooting incident, they recovered the abandoned phone and soon determined it belonged to Eric. Investigators obtained a warrant to analyze the device, and what they found was a treasure trove of evidence against the brothers. First, they retrieved the video of the AR-15 shooting on January 1st. In that video, Gardaí could easily identify both Eric and Glenn firing the rifle. But that wasn't all. Further videos on the phone showed Eric handling multiple firearms on what looked like the same occasion, the very weapons recovered in February. Investigators also examined the phone's digital traces and found incriminating searches. Notably, the Google search history included queries on how to wash gunshot residue from clothing and searches related to AR-15 rifles. All this evidence, extracted from O'Driscoll's own phone, transformed the case. Had Eric not lost his phone, the evidence might never have been found, and the case against him could have never materialized. Armed with the phone evidence, authorities moved to bring charges against O'Driscoll and his big brother. It wasn't until January 2024 that they were finally arrested and charged in connection with the firearms incident. On January 12, 2024, both men were taken into custody, and shortly thereafter, they made their first appearances in court. In total, Eric faced 6 firearms-related charges, while Glenn faced 2. Given the seriousness of these offences, involving automatic weapons and an organised crime feud, the case was directed to the Special Criminal Court, which handles Gangland cases. Following their arrest, both Eric and Glenn initially applied for bail, which is often an uphill battle in such high-profile Gangland cases. Defense lawyers argued that the evidence was circumstantial. For example, they pointed out there was no forensic evidence directly tying the brothers to the guns, and that the ballistic expert couldn't be 100% sure the rifle in the video was the exact one seized. They also offered that family members were willing to post a bond, around €3,000, and that the duo would abide by strict conditions if granted bail. However, the judge was unconvinced. The combination of video evidence and the violent feud context made the risk of releasing them too great. Bail was denied for both Eric and Glenn, meaning they would remain in custody pending trial. Amusingly, the bail hearings also touched on a detail that both men wore high-end Rolex watches, leading the court to question if they truly needed free legal aid. From January 2024 onward, Eric O'Driscoll was behind bars on remand. He would spend the next year in custody, awaiting the outcome. Glenn Ward, too, was locked up. At one point, he was held in a 23.5-hour lockdown for his own protection. The overwhelming evidence led the brothers to change strategy. Rather than going to a full trial, Eric and Glenn opted to plead guilty, a decision that likely reduced his eventual sentence. On April 7, 2025, the Special Criminal Court delivered its sentence to Eric O'Driscoll. Ms. Justice Melanie Greeley, joined by 2 other judges, sentenced O'Driscoll to 6 years in prison, with the final 12 months suspended. During the same hearing, the court mentioned that Glenn Ward, aka Mr. Flashy, would be sentenced later in the year for the same incident. Glenn's lawyer characterized his involvement as a grotesque act of bravado, but pointed out Glenn's lack of drug addiction and the hardship he endured in custody, referring to his 23.5-hour lockdown. The outcome for Glenn Ward is unknown, but it's expected he too will face a multi-year prison term, possibly longer than Eric's given he was the elder and presumed leader.